In the quiet town of Hillview, near the border with a neighboring state, a tragedy struck in the summer of 1990 that would haunt the community for decades. Ellen and Henry Parker, a devoted couple, watched their world collapse when their three identical triplet daughters, Lily, Rose, and Violet, just 7 years old, vanished without a trace while playing in the front yard of their family home. The laughter that once filled the air was replaced by an agonizing silence as days turned to weeks with no sign of the girls. The Parkers' lives became a tapestry of grief, woven with endless searches, sleepless nights, and a community's shared sorrow, yet no answers emerged. 25 years later, a fleeting glimpse of a familiar outfit would unravel a shocking truth, exposing the chilling reality of what happened to their beloved daughters. The afternoon sun beat down on the modest suburban neighborhood in the rural outskirts of Hillview. Ellen Parker adjusted her sun hat as she stood in the backyard of the Thompson family home, watching children play and adults mingle at young Timmy Thompson's birthday party. At 55 years old, Ellen still carried herself with grace, though the decades had etched fine lines around her eyes that had spent countless hours scanning faces in crowds, always searching. Her husband, Henry, 3 years her senior, stood chatting with some of the men by the grill. They had arrived 2 hours ago, joining the celebration, as the neighborhood had done for generations. The birthday song had been sung, candles blown out, and cake distributed. Children now played freely, while adults engaged in casual conversation. Ellen was half listening to her neighbor Linda's story about her garden when movement at the patio door caught her attention. A man she didn't recognize stepped into the backyard holding the hand of a young girl around 7 years old. "Sorry we're late," the man announced to no one in particular. Something happened at home. The girl immediately broke free from her father's grip and darted toward the other children playing in the yard. As she ran past, Ellen froze. The child wore green checkered overalls with bright yellow straps over a long-sleeved shirt. Her dark curly hair bounced as she moved. Something about the combination struck Ellen like a physical blow. Without excusing herself from the conversation, she moved quickly across the yard, her heart hammering in her chest. She reached out and grasped the girl's shoulder, turning her around to face her. "Where did you get those clothes?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hand moved instinctively to touch the girl's curly hair. The girl's eyes widened in alarm. She twisted away from Ellen's grasp and ran toward her father. "Daddy! Daddy!" she cried out, her voice high with fear. The man looked up, concerned, and immediately started walking toward Ellen, who stood rooted to the spot, trembling slightly. "Is everything okay?" the man asked, placing a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. His tone was more curious than accusatory, but his body language was clear. He was worried about what had just happened. "She touched me," the girl said, pressing against her father's side. "She scared me." The man's expression hardened slightly. "What's going on? Why did you grab my daughter?" Ellen's mouth opened, but no words came out. She reached toward the girl's clothing again, her fingers stopping short of actually touching her. "Those clothes? Where did you get them?" "Excuse me?" The man stepped between Ellen and his daughter. "What's your problem, lady?" Henry appeared at Ellen's side, along with several neighbors who had noticed the commotion. He wrapped a protective arm around his wife's shoulders, taking in the scene with a quick glance. "I'm sorry," Henry said, his voice steady, despite the slight tremor in his hand. "My wife didn't mean any harm." He looked at the girl, and Ellen felt him stiffen beside her. "Your daughter's outfit, it's very similar to what our girls wore. Our daughters, they were triplets. They went missing 25 years ago. They had green checkered overalls just like that with yellow straps and long sleeves. It must have shocked my wife," the neighbors murmured in understanding. Mrs. Thompson, the party host, stepped forward. "It's true," she said softly, to the man. "The Parker girls disappeared back in 1990. Terrible tragedy. The whole neighborhood searched for weeks." The man's expression softened immediately. "I'm so sorry, I had no idea." He looked down at his daughter's clothing. "I bought these months ago at a department store. I can't remember exactly when." Ellen, still stunned, pleaded, "Please, could I just look at the clothes? I just want to see if it's the same brand." Henry gently held her back. "Ellen, honey, the girl is not Lily, Rose, or Violet. Let's not upset her further." He turned to the man. "I apologize for my wife. This has been difficult." Mrs. Thompson touched Ellen's arm. "Ellen, dear, you look so pale. Maybe you should go home and rest." Henry nodded gratefully. "Yes, I think that's best." He thanked the party host, excused them from the gathering, and nodded respectfully to the father and daughter. "I wish we had met under better circumstances. I'm truly sorry for upsetting your wife," the man said sincerely. "I honestly had no idea. We're new to the neighborhood and thought attending the birthday party would be a nice way to meet everyone." "It's not your fault," Henry assured him. Henry guided Ellen out of the backyard, supporting her as they walked the 4 blocks to their home. Once inside, he helped her to the sofa and went to the kitchen to make tea. When he returned, he helped her take a sip from the steaming cup. Ellen's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to scare that little girl," she said, her voice breaking. When I saw those clothes." Henry nodded, sitting beside her. "I know. You had an anxiety attack. It's okay." "I can't forget them, Henry," Ellen said, tears streaming down her face now, even after 25 years. Henry took her hand in his. They would be adults now, all 3 of them grown women. "I know," Ellen whispered. "I feel so embarrassed, always bringing up the past, making everyone uncomfortable." "We don't have to forget our daughters," Henry said firmly. "I was shocked too when I saw that girl's clothes. They were so similar. Green checkered overalls, yellow straps, long sleeves." Ellen sat up straighter. "I want to see their photos again, Henry. The ones where they're wearing those clothes." Henry hesitated. "They're in the box in the attic. We haven't opened it in over 15 years. "Please," Ellen said, "if it will help me calm down." Henry sighed, but nodded. "I'll get it for you." He disappeared upstairs, and Ellen heard his footsteps overhead, then the creak of the attic ladder. Several minutes later, he returned carrying a dusty cardboard box. He set it on the coffee table and wiped the dust off with a nearby hand towel. Together, they opened the lid, revealing the carefully preserved belongings of their missing triplets. Ellen and Henry carefully removed items from the box, handling each one as if it were made of glass. Small toys, baseball gloves, 3 identical stuffed bears, homework assignments with gold stars and smiley faces. Each object a preserved moment, from their daughter's truncated childhood. "The photo album should be at the bottom," Henry said, his voice husky with emotion. "We packed it last." As they removed the final layer of memorabilia, the leather-bound album appeared. Henry lifted it gently and placed it on his lap. The cover was smooth from years of handling, though it hadn't been touched in decades. They settled side by side on the sofa as Henry opened the album. The first pages showed 3 identical newborns in the hospital, then 3 toddlers taking their first steps, birthday parties where candles were blown out in perfect synchronicity. They were always so in tune with each other, Ellen whispered, tracing a finger over a photo of the girls building a sand castle at the beach. Henry turned the pages slowly, and they paused at each image, recalling the stories behind them. Then they reached the photo they were looking for, the triplets standing in front of their house, wearing their green checkered overalls with yellow straps over long-sleeved shirts. They were smiling broadly, arms around each other's shoulders. This was taken the morning they disappeared, exactly 2 hours before they were gone, Henry said softly. Ellen nodded and leaned closer, studying the overalls. "Look, Henry, the girl at the party, her clothes were similar but different. The shade of green is different. Ours look more vintage, while hers was more modern, and the checkered lines are thinner in our photo. The straps are different too, Henry." Noted. Similar concept, but definitely not the same garments. Ellen rubbed her eyes and sighed. "I feel terrible about how I reacted to that poor girl and her father. What were their names again?" Henry replied, "The girl is Emily, and her father is James. They're pretty new to the neighborhood. Moved in about 4 months ago, I think." "I should apologize to them later," Ellen said, shaking her head. "I must have terrified that child. They continued looking at the photo, reminiscing about that final day. Henry smiled as Ellen recounted how Violet had insisted on wearing her overalls backward until she convinced her otherwise, and how Rose had already managed to get a grass stain on her knee before breakfast. As Henry poured himself another cup of tea, Ellen suddenly poked his arm, almost causing him to spill. "Henry, look at the background," she said urgently. "Isn't that the Cadillac Lily was such a big fan of?" Henry set down the teapot and peered at the photo. In the background, partially visible at the edge of the frame, was the front section of a reddish-brown Cadillac parked across the street. "You're right," he said slowly, memories surfacing. Lily was obsessed with cars, especially that one. The girls used to beg to look inside whenever they saw it. "That's Mr. Edward Stone's Cadillac," Ellen said, her voice growing more intense. "Their schoolteacher, remember how he rarely drove it? He told us it was his most cherished possession." "Everyone in the school community knew about that car," Henry agreed. "The kids thought it was the most amazing thing they'd ever seen." "We were such a tight community back then," Ellen murmured. "Everyone knew each other, and Mr. Edward was such a kind man. The children adored him." She turned the photo over, checking for any notes, then back again, examining it more closely. "Are you absolutely sure this image was taken on the day they disappeared?" "Yes. Why?" "Because Mr. Edward had moved to a different town by then," Ellen said, her brow furrowing. "Remember how sad all the parents were when he switched schools? The kids loved him so much we threw him a farewell party at the school the day before. He left." Henry frowned. "I'm certain this was taken the morning of their disappearance. They disappeared in the afternoon." "But that's strange," Ellen insisted. "Mr. Edward had supposedly moved from town 2 weeks before the girls disappeared, so how could his Cadillac be parked there in the photo?" Henry set the album aside and rummaged through the box again, searching through the items they had already removed. Finally, he found what he was looking for: the original Kodak photo envelope with the film negatives still inside. The processing date was stamped clearly on the outside. "Look," he said, showing Ellen the date. "This confirms it. The film was developed 3 days after they disappeared. These were definitely taken that morning." Ellen rubbed her arms, suddenly chilled despite the warm air in the room. If that was really Mr. Edward's car, then he might have seen something suspicious in the neighborhood that day. The police would have questioned him. She paused, thinking. But they never mentioned interviewing the teacher, which means he must have truly been gone before the girls disappeared. Henry noticed Ellen's increasing agitation and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Ellen, it could be a coincidence. It might not even be Mr. Edward's Cadillac. It could have belonged to anyone. But I don't remember anyone else in the neighborhood who had a Cadillac," Ellen countered. "We were very close with everyone. We would have known." "Maybe it didn't belong to a local," Henry suggested reasonably. "It could have been a visitor to one of the neighbors." "You shouldn't overthink this, honey. The police examined all our family photos, including this one. They questioned everyone and followed all leads. If it had been Mr. Edward's Cadillac, they would have noticed the license plate and confirmed it to us." Ellen took a deep breath as Henry urged, accepting another sip of tea from the cup he offered. The warmth seemed to calm her slightly. "You're right," she said finally. "It's probably nothing." Henry nodded in relief and closed the photo album. Ellen had removed the photo, wanting to keep it close. Together, they began gently returning the items to the box. Each memento a fragment of the lives their daughters had lived and the futures they were meant to have. After packing everything back into the box, Henry glanced at the ornate clock on the mantel and jumped to his feet. "Good Lord, I completely lost track of time. I have my checkup appointment today at 12 noon, and it's already 11:45. It's Saturday, and the clinic only opens until 2 p.m. Ellen looked up from the photo album, surprised. "I totally forgot to remind you. Dr. Wilson doesn't like it when patients are late." She quickly helped Henry gather what he needed: his health insurance card, the list of medications he was taking, and the journal where he'd been recording his blood pressure readings. Within 10 minutes, Henry was ready to leave. "Are you sure you'll be okay by yourself?" he asked, pausing at the door. "I'll be fine," Ellen assured him. "I'll make some lunch, maybe take a nap this afternoon, and I'll have dinner ready when you get back. Don't worry about me." Henry nodded, kissed her cheek, and hurried out to the car. After he left, Ellen went to their bedroom and picked up her phone from the nightstand. There was a text message from Margaret Wilson, an old friend who had worked at the school board for nearly 20 years before retiring. Annual school district retiree reunion coming up next month. Hope to see you and Henry there. We miss you both. Ellen sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the message. Margaret would have known Edward Stone professionally. She might have information about him, though Ellen didn't want to suspect. Mr. Edward, he had been such a kind and wonderful teacher, especially good with children. She couldn't shake the strange feeling and questions that had settled over her since spotting the Cadillac in the photograph. Impulsively, she tapped Margaret's contact information and called her. Ellen, what a wonderful surprise. Margaret answered warmly. Did you get my text about the reunion? I did. Yes, Henry and I will try to make it, Ellen said. How have you been, Margaret? It's been too long. They spent several minutes catching up, exchanging news about mutual friends and sharing updates about their health and families. Finally, Ellen steered the conversation toward her real reason for calling. Margaret, do you remember Mr. Edward Stone? He taught at Riverside Elementary back in the early 90s. Edward? Of course I remember him. Such a talented teacher. The children and parents adored him. Do you know where he is now? Ellen asked, trying to sound casual. I remember he moved out of town, but I can't recall exactly where. He went. There was a pause on the line. Actually, Ellen, I think you've got it wrong. Edward never continued teaching, at least not in the public school system. He never filed any transfer papers to another district or state. Ellen sat up straighter. He didn't? But we had a farewell party for him. He told everyone he was moving to teach at another school. No, that's not how it happened. Maybe he was just joking when he said that. You know how he was, Margaret said. From what I've heard, he moved to a remote area in Hillview and started a private charity farm for immigrant children. A farm? Ellen repeated, confused. I always thought he moved to a different state to teach. No, nothing. Like that, Margaret assured her. Wait, someone mentioned the name of his place to me a few months ago. Let me think. There was silence for a moment. Ah, I remember now. It's called Edward's Sanctuary for Growth. Edward's Sanctuary for Growth? Ellen repeated, committing the name to memory. Why are you suddenly asking about Edward? Margaret inquired. Ellen hesitated. I just remembered he had a Cadillac, and I saw a similar Cadillac in an old family picture. Oh yes, he did. Have that beautiful Cadillac, Margaret confirmed, but he rarely took it out for a drive. He preferred to use his other car for daily travel. That Cadillac was his pride and joy, more of a showpiece than transportation. Do you remember exactly when Edward left town? Ellen asked, her heart beating faster. Margaret sighed. It was so long ago, Ellen. I really couldn't say for certain. After ending the call, Ellen immediately went to the computer in the small home office and searched for Edward's Sanctuary for Growth. She found a simple website with minimal information. The homepage banner showed smiling young women and girls, working on a farm. Most appeared to be of Spanish or neighboring heritage, with dark hair and tanned skin. She browsed through the gallery photos, but nothing looked unusual or suspicious. In fact, the images portrayed what seemed to be a positive, nurturing environment. Edward appeared to be doing good work providing opportunities for immigrant children. His profile page featured a brief biography, mentioning his background as an elementary teacher and his passion for working with children. The farm's mission statement emphasized education, support, and creating pathways to success for immigrant youth. Ellen found the farm's address and an email contact, but no phone number. She stared at the screen, contemplating her next move. It might be good to meet with Mr. Edward again to see what he was doing now. Perhaps she could show him the picture and ask if the Cadillac was his. Checking the clock, 11:50 a.m., Ellen realized she could still make it to the address today. It was only a 2-hour drive. If she left soon, she could reach the farm by early afternoon with plenty of daylight remaining. She picked up her phone and called Henry at the clinic. Henry, how's your appointment going? I'm still in the waiting room, he replied. Everything okay? Yes, but I found some interesting information. Ellen explained what Margaret had told her about Edward's farm. I'd like to go there today, Henry. Would you come with me? There was a pause. I don't know, Ellen. I'm a bit worried about you. You seem fixated on this Cadillac coincidence. I'm fine, she assured him. I don't want to overthink this or have bad feelings toward Mr. Edward. He was always so kind. The charity farm looks interesting, and it would be nice to catch up with him after all these years. All right, Henry agreed. But we should call him first. Let him know we're coming. I didn't find a phone number, just an email address. I'll send a message, though they might not see it before we arrive. They agreed to meet at the clinic since it was on the way to the farm. Henry would finish his appointment, and Ellen would take the bus to meet him there. I'll leave right away, Ellen said, already reaching for her purse. See you soon. Ellen left the house with a sense of purpose, locking the door behind her and walking briskly to the bus stop 5 blocks away. The Hillview heat was building as the day progressed, and she was grateful when the bus arrived just as she reached the stop. The 20-minute ride to the medical clinic passed quickly, as Ellen's mind churned with questions about Edward Stone and his Cadillac. She stepped off the bus. A young woman in a straw hat and bright yellow t-shirt thrust a colorful flyer into her hand. County Agricultural Fair this week, the woman announced cheerfully before moving on to the next disembarking passenger. Ellen glanced at the flyer as she walked toward the clinic. It advertised a week-long agricultural event that had started yesterday. Each day featured different activities, culminating in a farmer's market and various competitions over the weekend. She noticed the large print announcing a special auction today at a site not far from Edward's farm. Interesting, she murmured, tucking the flyer into her purse as she approached the clinic entrance. Inside, she found Henry at the cashier's desk, settling his co-payment for the appointment. He smiled when he saw her. Perfect timing, he said. Dr. Wilson says everything looks good. My blood pressure is down since they adjusted my medication. That's wonderful news, Ellen replied, genuinely relieved. Are you ready for our little adventure? Soon, they were in Henry's sedan, following the GPS directions toward Edward's sanctuary for growth. The landscape gradually changed, from suburban neighborhoods to increasingly rural farmland as they drove. Any response to your email? Henry asked, eyes on the road ahead. No, nothing, Ellen replied. She pulled the flyer from her purse. But look at this. I got it. At the bus stop. There's a big agricultural event happening this week. Today there's an auction not far from Edward's farm. Henry glanced briefly at the flyer as she held it up. I wonder if Edward will be at that event. It's possible, Ellen agreed, studying the map on the flyer. The auction site is in the same general area as his farm, just a different address. Let's visit his farm first as planned, Henry suggested. We can always check out the auction afterward. After driving for more than 90 minutes through increasingly remote countryside, they turned onto a long gravel road marked by a simple wooden sign, Edward's Sanctuary for Growth. The driveway led to a cluster of buildings, a large farmhouse, several barns, and what appeared to be dormitories. The place seemed quiet with few people visible. As they parked and got out of the car, they noticed a young woman emerging from one of the barns. Hello there, Henry called out, waving. The young woman, of neighboring heritage, probably in her early 20s, approached them with a friendly smile. Hello, can I help you? We're looking for Edward Stone, Ellen said. Is this his farm? Yes, this is Mr. Stone's place, the young woman confirmed. Do you have an appointment with him? Henry shook his head. No, not exactly. We're old friends from back when Edward was a teacher. We sent an email to the address on the website. The young woman's expression cleared. Oh, that's the old email address. We've been switching to a new one this past month, but the website hasn't been updated yet. She looked apologetic. Mr. Stone isn't here right now. He and most of our staff and children went to the county agricultural event. There's an auction today, and we're also running a stall to promote our charity program. Yes, we just heard about the event, Ellen said, trying to hide her disappointment. She turned toward the car, ready to leave. Wait, Henry said, placing a hand on her arm. He turned to the young woman. Since we're already here, Would it be possible to look around the farm a bit? We'd love to see what Edward has built here. The young woman hesitated. Let me check with the supervisor on duty. One moment, please. She walked away, pulling out a phone, and had a brief conversation. When she returned, she was smiling. That's fine. I'd be happy to show you around. For the next 40 minutes, they followed her through the property. She showed them the barns where they kept livestock, the stables for the horses, and the fields where they grew various crops. Throughout the tour, she explained their charity program, how they helped immigrant children learn about agriculture and farming while providing them with education and support. This is one of our special barns, the young woman said as they approached a colorful structure with children's paintings decorating the exterior. It's designed specifically for the younger children to play, get messy, and explore. Mr. Stone created this program to introduce farming life to kids in a fun way. Inside the barn, they found a woman arranging materials on several low tables. She appeared to be in her late 30s or early 40s with thick black curly hair and fair skin. When she smiled at their entrance, Ellen noticed her unusually wide, bright smile. Sophie, these are friends of Mr. Stone, their young guide explained. They stopped by hoping to see him. The woman wiped her hands on a towel and approached them, extending her hand. I'm Sophie, the activities coordinator. Nice to meet you. Henry and Ellen Parker, Henry said as they shook hands. Sophie gestured to the material she'd been arranging. I'm preparing some demonstration activities for potential investors and clients who will be visiting during the event this week. We want to show them exactly how we work with the children here. She moved around the tables with practiced ease, explaining each station. I've been here a very long time, since I was 7 years old, actually. Mr. Stone rescued me and took me in when I had nowhere else to go. Edward was a schoolteacher before this, Ellen said, watching Sophie's movements carefully. Our daughters were his students. He always had a way with children. He's a woman with a noble heart, Sophie agreed. They looked around. The barn, taking in the children's artwork that covered one entire wall. There were colorful drawings done with crayons alongside more textured creations where leaves, oats, and eggshells had been pasted to create unique effects. Ellen's gaze landed on a drawing of a red Cadillac meticulously decorated with colorful grains of rice glued to the paper. The detail was impressive. That Cadillac, she said, pointing to the drawing. I remember that car was Mr. Stone's treasure, Sophie nodded. Yes, he still has it here. In fact, he took it out this morning. She looked at the drawing with pride. Actually, that one is mine. I made it as an example to show the children. That's why it's neater than their creations. She chuckled, gesturing to the more chaotic artwork surrounding it. Ellen felt a strange chill run through her body, like a gust of cold wind across her skin. She stared at Sophie more intently, her black curly hair, her wide smile, and felt an unsettling sense of familiarity. Something about her mannerisms, the way she used her hands when she spoke. Sophie noticed her staring and shifted uncomfortably. Is everything all right, ma'am? Henry placed a subtle hand on Ellen's, back a gentle warning. Yes, Ellen said quickly. I'm sorry, it's just all these children's crafts. They reminded me of my girls when they were young. She hesitated, then asked, Do you have any siblings, Sophie? Ellen, Henry said in a low, cautioning voice. Sophie chuckled awkwardly. Yes, I do, actually. My sister's at the event today with Mr. Stone. She checked her watch. You should check it out if you have the time. There's going to be a children's performance and an auction. They thanked Sophie for her time, and their young guide led them back toward the entrance of the property. As they walked, Ellen looked back once again. Her mind raced with possibilities and questions she couldn't yet articulate. When they reached their car, they thanked the young staff member for the tour. Ellen's hands trembled slightly as she fastened her seatbelt, her thoughts consumed by the woman with curly black hair and a wide smile who had been rescued by Edward Stone at the age of 7. Inside the car, Henry started the engine and checked the GPS on his phone. The auction site is only 15 minutes from here, he said. Should we go? Absolutely, Ellen replied, her voice tense with excitement. I need to speak with Mr. Stone. As they drove down the dusty country road, Henry glanced at his wife. Ellen, why did you ask Sophie such personal questions about whether she had siblings? Ellen stared out the window, watching the farmland roll by. I just had this strange feeling when I saw that Cadillac drawing she made, and then her hair and her smile. She turned to face Henry. They look like Lily. Henry shook his head. Ellen, you can't possibly think that. They look very different. Just because of the hair color and curls and the smile doesn't mean… I know, Ellen interrupted. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be inappropriate. It's just something about her felt familiar. Henry patted her hand reassuringly, but said nothing more. The rest of the short drive passed in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. They arrived at the county fairgrounds where the agricultural event was being held. Colorful tents and booths lined the perimeter of a large field with farm equipment displays in the center. The place was crowded with farmers, ranchers, and families enjoying the festivities. No auction happening right now, Henry observed, checking the schedule posted near the entrance. Looks like it has passed. They walked through the fairgrounds, stopping occasionally to look at displays of prized livestock and agricultural innovations. After about 15 minutes, they spotted a white tent with a blue banner reading Edward's Sanctuary for Growth stretched across the top. As they approached, Ellen's breath caught in her throat. There, speaking with a couple who appeared to be potential donors, was Edward Stone. Though 25 years had passed, she recognized him immediately. His hair had gone completely white, and deep lines etched his face, but he still had the same enthusiastic gesturing as he spoke. They waited until the couple moved on, then stepped forward. Mr. Stone, Henry said. Edward Stone? The older man turned, his expression polite but blank. Yes, can I help you? You probably don't remember us, Ellen said. I'm Ellen Parker, and this is my husband, Henry. Our daughters, Lily, Rose, and Violet, were your students at Riverside Elementary. Edward's brow furrowed as he studied their faces. I'm terribly sorry. It's been a long time, and I'm an old man now, almost 65. He tapped his temple. The memory fails a bit more each year. Can you believe that? Ellen stepped closer. I organized your farewell party with the other mothers before you left the school. If there was ever a woman with 3 identical little girls following behind her like ducklings, it was me, Ellen Parker. Recognition slowly dawned in Edward's eyes, and his face broke into a smile. Of course, the Parker family. Lily, Rose, and Violet, bright girls, all 3 of them. His smile faltered slightly. I'm very glad to see you both after all these years. We were surprised to learn about your farm, Henry said. It's quite an impressive operation you've built. Thank you, Edward replied. It's been my life's work these past decades. The conversation inevitably shifted to the triplets. Edward's expression grew somber. I heard about the girls going missing. A terrible tragedy. I was deeply saddened when I learned of it. I always thought you'd moved to another state to teach, Ellen said, watching his reaction carefully. Edward shook his head. No, I stayed in Hillview. I went to a different town to get a certification and prepare for this venture. He gestured around. Starting this farm was always my dream. Ellen leaned forward slightly. Mr. Edward, do you remember what date you left town? Was it before or after my girls disappeared? Before, Edward said promptly. It must have been before because otherwise the police would have questioned me. He tilted his head. Why do you ask? Without answering, Ellen reached into her purse and produced the photograph she had taken from the album. She held it out to Edward. I was looking at this photo just this morning. It was taken the day the girls disappeared, just 2 hours before, actually. She pointed to the edge of the frame. I noticed the Cadillac in the background. Henry stepped closer. Was that your Cadillac, Mr. Stone? Do you remember driving in our neighborhood or parking near our home that day? Edward's expression changed subtly. The affable smile disappeared, replaced by a tight-lipped seriousness. He stared at the photo for a long moment, silent. I can't remember exactly the date when I left town, he finally said, his voice lower than before. And I certainly don't recall driving near your home or seeing the girls that day. He handed the photo back to Ellen. It must belong to someone else. Henry nodded, placing a hand on Ellen's shoulder. Well, at least now we have our answer. Ellen nodded too, but she noticed Henry's behavior had changed. He seemed suddenly tense, clearing his throat and shifting his weight from foot to foot. Edward looked at them with an unreadable expression. Do you think the Cadillac is connected to your girl's disappearance? We're not sure, Henry replied. The police never mentioned it back in 1990. We just noticed it in the photo this morning. Edward checked his watch. It's nearly 3 p.m. We need to start wrapping up. He turned to two women standing behind the table. The event is ending at 4 p.m. Let's get everything packed up. He turned back to Ellen and Henry. You should take the opportunity to look around while you can. In about 10 minutes, there will be a closing performance by the children from our farm. He pointed toward a small outdoor stage at the far end of the fairgrounds. It's quite charming. You might enjoy it. Thank you, Henry said. It was good to see you again, Edward. As they walked away from the tent, Ellen lagged slightly behind. She heard Edward's voice, low and urgent, speaking into his phone. Leave immediately after the performance. Get Anna here. Yes, now. Ellen froze, then slowly turned back. Edward was busy directing his staff, paying no attention to them. She hurried to catch up with Henry, her mind racing with questions, and a growing sense of dread. They made their way to the small outdoor stage where a group of children was assembling for the closing performance. Most appeared to be of neighboring heritage, ranging from about 5 to 10 years old, with a few kindergarten-aged children mixed in. The children lined up on the simple wooden platform and began singing a cheerful folk song in Spanish. Ellen watched the performance, but her mind was elsewhere. She scanned the crowd, the staff members, looking for anything unusual. After a few minutes, movement at the edge of the stage caught her eye. A woman emerged from behind the stage, walking with purpose toward the vendor area. Her pace was quick, almost hurried. Even from a distance, Ellen could see her thick, curly black hair. Henry, she whispered urgently, tugging at his sleeve. Look at that woman! She pointed discreetly. The one walking so fast. See her hair? Doesn't she look like Sophie? Henry followed her gaze, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the retreating figure. Yes, he said slowly. The resemblance is striking. Do you think they're twins? Ellen asked, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. Before Henry could answer, Ellen was already moving away from the crowd, weaving between spectators to get a better look at the woman's face. Henry hurried after her, keeping close. They circled around a cotton candy vendor, positioning themselves where they could observe without being obvious. The woman had reached Edward's tent and was engaged in an intense conversation with Edward Stone. As they watched, the woman turned, slightly, giving them a clear view of her profile. Ellen gasped softly. The resemblance to Sophie was undeniable. They could have been identical. The same wide smile, the same thick eyebrows, the same animated way of gesturing while speaking. This must be the sister Sophie mentioned, Ellen whispered. Anna, I think, the one Edward was calling for. Henry's face had gone pale. The similar smile, same curly black hair. Could they be Lily and Rose? Ellen finished, her voice barely audible. Remember how Violet used to have a slightly smaller body and smaller eyes? She was always the easiest to identify because of her eyes. They watched as Edward and Anna suddenly broke off their conversation. Edward gestured sharply, and both began walking rapidly toward the parking area, leaving the other staff members at the tent looking confused. Why are they in such a rush? Ellen's voice rose with alarm. We should follow them. I need to talk to that woman. She started forward, but Henry caught her arm. Ellen, wait. We could be mistaken. If they really are our girls, Violet should be here too. Let's check the area first. If Violet is here somewhere, then we can call the police to investigate Edward. Ellen hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. You're right. Besides, We know where the farm is if we need to go back. They moved quickly through the fairgrounds, scanning faces in the crowd, looking behind booths and tents, but found no third woman resembling Sophie and Anna. Maybe we're wrong, Henry said, though his voice lacked conviction. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But Ellen was already heading back toward Edward's tent, where a single staff member was packing up the last of their materials. She was an older woman, perhaps in her late 60s, with weathered hands that spoke of decades of farm work. Excuse. Me, Ellen said, trying to keep her voice casual. We were just at the farm earlier today and met Sophie. Then we saw another woman who looks just like her. Anna, is it? Are they sisters? The woman looked up, nodding. Yes, they're twins. Twins? Ellen repeated, exchanging a glance with Henry. The woman chuckled. Well, actually, here's a fun fact. They're triplets. The third one isn't here today, though. She works at Mr. Stone's private estate, not far from the farm, Ellen. And Henry stared at each other, identical expressions of dread and hope mingling on their faces. Where is this private estate? They asked in unison. The woman gave them an odd look, clearly taken aback by their synchronized question and sudden intensity. I'm sorry, but I can't disclose the owner's private information. She handed them a brochure. Here's the farm address if you want to know more about our programs and what we're doing. Yes, thank you, Henry said, taking the brochure even though they already had the information. We appreciate your time. They stepped away from the tent, moving to a quiet corner where they wouldn't be overheard. Henry, Ellen whispered, her voice shaking. Triplets. They're triplets, and they're the right age. Sophie said she's been with Edward since she was 7. Henry ran a hand through his hair, his expression stricken. It can't be a coincidence. The Cadillac in the photo, Edward's strange reaction, and now these 3 women who look so much alike. Our girls, Ellen said, tears filling her eyes. After all these years, could we have finally found our girls? They rushed to the parking lot, scanning the area for Edward or Anna, but saw no sign of either. Getting into their car, Henry started the engine. We're going back to the farm, he said firmly, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. As they pulled onto the road, Ellen pulled out her phone and dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, she asked to speak to a detective, explaining, it was regarding their cold case of missing children from 1990. Within moments, she was connected to Detective Lopez from the Missing Persons Unit. This is going to sound incredible, Ellen began, her voice trembling slightly. But my husband and I believe we found our daughters who disappeared 25 years ago. She quickly explained everything. The photograph with the Cadillac, finding Edward Stone at his charity farm, and discovering 2 women who appeared to be identical to each other, with a third sister not present. They look like they're the right age. They should be 32 now, and they have the same features as our girls, she concluded. The man who took them, Edward Stone, was their elementary school teacher. He left the event in a hurry when we showed him the photograph. I understand your concerns, Mrs. Parker, Detective Lopez replied, his tone calm but firm. But I need you to promise not to confront Mr. Stone on your own once you reach the farm. He was a respected figure in the community, and we'd like to question him first. We're also working on gathering more information and locating his private residence. My team and I are heading to the farm now, and I've already contacted the local sheriff's department. They should be there within 15 minutes. We're almost there, Henry said, turning onto the gravel road leading to Edward's sanctuary for growth. If you see Edward, maintain a safe distance, the detective warned. The fact that he left early from the event with one of these women is concerning, but we have to be careful. We will, Ellen promised, keeping the line open. They reached the farm, but parked well away from the main buildings, positioning their car behind a stand of trees where they could observe without being seen. Minutes ticked by with no sign of movement, though a car remained parked in the farm's lot. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, 3 figures emerged from the main house: Edward, Anna, and Sophie. They moved quickly, throwing bags into the trunk of Edward's car. They're leaving, Ellen whispered into the phone. Edward, Sophie, and Anna, they're all getting into a car. Stay where you are, Detective Lopez instructed. We found the farm's property records. It's registered under a different name than Edward Stone. We're issuing warrants now to search both the farm and the private residence we've located. As Edward's car began to pull away from the house, two sheriff's vehicles appeared on the gravel drive, lights flashing. They quickly positioned themselves to block the exit. "The sheriff's deputies are here," Ellen reported, her heart racing. "Good. Stay in your car until I tell you otherwise," the detective replied. Through the windshield they watched, as 4 deputies approached Edward's vehicle, hands hovering near their holsters. Edward stepped out, his hands in the air, but his face a mask of confusion and anger. Sophie and Anna exited more slowly, looking bewildered. One of the deputies spoke at length with Edward, who gestured emphatically, pointing toward the house and shaking his head. The deputy seemed uncertain, glancing at his colleagues. "I think the sheriff is hesitant," Henry murmured. "Edward must have a good reputation around here." Indeed, they could hear fragments of conversation carried on the breeze. "Respected. Figure in the county. Charity work. Must be a misunderstanding." "I can't wait any longer," Ellen said suddenly, dropping the phone into her purse but leaving the line open. "They're going to let him go." Before Henry could stop her, she was out of the car and striding toward the group. Henry hurried after her. "Edward Stone!" Ellen called out, her voice stronger than she felt. Everyone turned to look at them. Edward's expression darkened when he recognized them. "Mrs. Parker," one of the deputies said, stepping forward, "please, return to your vehicle. We're handling this situation." Instead, Ellen reached into her purse and pulled out the photograph from 1990. She held it up for everyone to see. "If you're even considering letting this man go, then let me show you something," she said. "These are my daughters, Lily, Rose, and Violet Parker. They vanished 25 years ago on July 10th, 1990. She turned and pointed to Sophie and Anna. "And here are 2 of them standing right in front of you." Sophie and Anna stared at the photograph, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock. They moved closer, examining the image of 3 identical girls in green checkered overalls. "That's us," Sophie said softly. "With Jane." "Is there a 3rd sister?" one of the deputies asked sharply. Both women nodded, still staring at the photograph. "I did nothing wrong," Edward insisted, his voice rising. "I saved these girls. They were abandoned." "These were my children." "They were not abandoned," Ellen said, her voice breaking. "They disappeared while playing outside our house one afternoon." She pointed to the edge of the photograph. "That's your Cadillac in the background, isn't it, Edward? The same one you still have." Edward remained silent, his jaw working. "The Cadillac is in the garage near the farmhouse," Anna said quietly. "He still has it." Sophie looked at Ellen, then at Henry. "Are you really our parents? Edward told us you were in prison." "Yes," they said in unison, tears streaming down Ellen's face. "But we were never in prison. That man has been lying to you all this time. You've all grown so much, just like Henry and I always believed you would." "We're 32 years old now," Anna said, as if trying to make sense of it all. "That's right," Ellen confirmed. "You were born on March 20th, 1983. The deputies exchanged glances. Then the senior officer stepped forward. "Mr. Stone, please turn around and place your hands behind your back. You are now our primary suspect in the kidnapping case." As one deputy handcuffed Edward, another spoke into his radio, confirming the warrant execution at the private residence. The peaceful farm transformed into a hive of activity as more law enforcement vehicles arrived. Forensic technicians searched the buildings while detectives interviewed Sophie and Anna separately. In the garage, they found the Cadillac, its cherry red paint dulled with age, but unmistakably the same vehicle from the photograph. In Edward's office, they discovered the original license plate hidden in a locked drawer, along with documents bearing the false names of Sophie, Anna, and Jane. "They should be Lily, Rose, and Violet," Ellen told the detective, watching as evidence was bagged and tagged. "I know Sophie is Lily because of her wide smile. Anna is Rose. She always had that agility and slimmer build. So, Jane must be Violet." "They're not even of neighboring heritage," Henry added, "though our ancestry does include some mixed heritage. which is why they could pass for it. When questioned about their third sister, Sophie explained, Edward always kept Jane at the house, never at the farm. She takes care of the younger children there, mostly orphaned immigrant kids. He told us we were rescued, Anna added. Said our parents were immigrants who did something bad and went to prison for life. We believed him because we were so young when it happened. What did he do to you? A detective asked gently. Both women looked uncomfortable. Nothing. Bad in the last 15 years, Sophie finally said. He just expected absolute obedience to do things exactly as he said. But our childhood was harsh, Anna added quietly. He would discipline us often, make us strip, touch us in ways that felt strange, then hit us with a rattan stick. He said it was the consequence for not listening or being naughty. Now we understand what he really did. But even all these times, we genuinely believed we were so bad that he had to treat us that way for our own good. That's what he made us believe, especially Anna. Later that evening, as twilight settled over the farm, a call came through from the team at Edwards' private residence. We found Jane, the officer reported, along with 9 children ranging from 5 to 11 years old. We're moving them all to the hospital for evaluation. Many appear frightened and traumatized. And Jane? Ellen asked anxiously. How is she? Confused but physically well. We've explained the situation briefly. She, Sophie, and Anna will be reunited at the police station along with you and your husband. As darkness fell, Ellen and Henry were escorted to a police car for the drive to the station. Sophie and Anna followed in separate vehicles, each accompanied by a detective. Ellen reached for Henry's hand as they drove away from the farm, leaving behind the place that had been both a prison and a home to their daughters for 25 years. Our girls, she whispered. We found our girls. The fluorescent lights of the police station cast harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Ellen sat in a small interview room, a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee untouched before her. Detective Lopez sat across the table, a recording device between them, as she recounted the day her world had shattered 25 years ago. Our community was very close back then, she explained, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Everyone knew everyone. Mr. Edward was highly respected. He was the girls' favorite teacher. Sometimes he'd drive children home with parent consent, of course. She described that fateful day, her voice steady despite the pain that still lingered in her eyes. Henry and I were both home, but we often let the children play outside by themselves for a few hours. It was a different time back in 1990. The neighbors all knew the girls, so we felt safe letting them play unsupervised. You didn't see them being taken? Detective Lopez asked gently. Ellen shook her head. I was doing house chores in the back room. Henry was fixing something in the backyard. Neither of us was watching the window. Her voice caught. One minute they were there playing in the front yard, and the next they were just gone. Detective nodded sympathetically, making notes. Mrs. Parker, we've interviewed Mr. Stone and questioned the staff from the farm. Given his age and health, Mr. Stone seems to have decided to confess rather than fight the charges. Ellen straightened, her attention sharpening. What did he say? He said he always felt connected to the triplets. That's how he phrased it. That afternoon, before he supposedly left town, he decided he wanted to take them with him. The detective flipped through his notes. He lured them by offering ice cream and a short drive in his Cadillac. The girls were apparently fascinated with that car. Lily, especially, Ellen whispered. Stone had planned the kidnapping in advance. He had already packed essentials and had forged paperwork for crossing county lines. Later, he returned to this county and established the farm using a forged identity. He purchased the isolated property with cash under a false LLC and claimed to be running a nonprofit for migrant children. But how could there be no witnesses? Henry asked, having been brought into the room to hear the findings. And how did the police never find him? There were no screams or struggles that would have alerted anyone, the detective explained. To the girls, Mr. Stone was a trusted figure, offering them ice cream and a ride in his fancy car. The triplets were known to wander within the block, Ellen added. So maybe no one thought anything of seeing them with him? Exactly, Detective Lopez confirmed. After the ice cream trip, Stone convinced them not to go home yet. He told them their house was in danger and that their parents were involved in something bad. Over time, he brainwashed the girls. They had trusted him so completely that it was relatively easy to manipulate them. They were only 7 years old. Henry took Ellen's hand, his face grim. He told the triplets they were orphaned immigrant children, the detective continued, that their parents had hidden their true origins from them, that they had been living illegally in America, and that you both had been sent to prison. He gradually indoctrinated them with these stories, even creating fabricated photo albums to support his lies. So, the motive for kidnapping our girls was just fascination? Ellen asked incredulously. The detective's expression grew somber. We've investigated Stone's background. He lost his entire family, wife and twin daughters, in a house fire in the early 80s. It appears he suffered a psychological break, though he managed to function outwardly in society. Based on his statements and psychological evaluation, he came to believe certain children were meant to be his, especially those with strong emotional bonds like triplets. Ellen closed her eyes, trying to process the twisted logic that had stolen 25 years from her family. What happens now? Henry asked. Stone will face multiple charges: kidnapping, child abuse, false imprisonment, identity fraud, and more. The younger children found at his private residence are being evaluated, and we're working to identify them and locate their families. The detective stood. But I think there are 3 people who have waited long enough to see. You. He opened the door and spoke quietly to an officer in the hallway. Moments later, the door reopened. Sophie, Anna, and Jane, Lily, Rose, and Violet stood hesitantly in the doorway. Though they were grown women now, Ellen could still see her. Little girls in their features, Lily's wide smile, Rose's thoughtful eyes, Violet's smaller frame. For a long moment, no one moved. 25 years of separation hung between them like an invisible wall, a lifetime of missed birthdays, graduations, heartaches, and triumphs. Then Ellen rose from her chair, a strangled sob escaping her throat. She took one uncertain step, forward, then another. Henry stood beside her, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered face. My girls, Ellen whispered. My beautiful girls. Something in her voice seemed to break through. Lily was the first to move, crossing the room in 3 long strides to enfold her mother in her arms. Rose and Violet followed immediately, and Henry stepped forward to complete the circle. They stood there, 5 people holding on to each other as if afraid they might disappear again, tears mingling as 25 years of grief and loss poured out in a flood of emotion. I never stopped looking for you, Ellen said through her tears, touching each of their faces in turn, relearning the contours that had changed from girl to woman. Not for one single day. We didn't know, Violet said softly. We thought you were gone. But we're here now, Henry said, his voice thick with emotion. We're all here now. Outside the interview room window, the night had deepened, stars appearing in the vast Hillview sky. Inside, a family torn apart by one man's twisted obsession began the first tentative moments of healing, holding on to each other in the harsh fluorescent light of a small-town police station finally miraculously complete once more.